Hitting revenue targets is hard and requires constant hustle. Last quarter's success is already forgotten. Learn the mindset and tactics of today's most successful revenue producers in B2B marketing and sales. We call this the revenue hustle. I'm your host, Tom Hessen, navigating you on this journey. Today's show is sponsored by 9 Lenses, an interactive assessment platform that enables you to add instant value to your buyers and allows your sales team to tailor business conversations focused on the pain points each and every time. Check them out at 9lenses.com. Hi, this is your host, Tom Hessen of the Revenue Hustle podcast, and we are back with another exciting episode. And today I have another great guest, Alex Pacak. Welcome to the Revenue Hustle.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Very, very excited to be here. I've heard a few of these podcasts already too, and really appreciated some of the insights and guidance, I guess you could say, from some of the other individuals coming on. So very excited to be part of that and talk a little bit with you today.
Yeah, I know we're going to have some insights from you here in a few moments, but you currently are the Associate Director of Sales Enablement for SoftServe Americas. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, you got it. So before getting into enablement, I was in the sales world. So started off with some door-to-door sales, retail sales, worked my way into the IT space, with some SaaS and OEM sales back at Dell prior to SoftServe. Moved over here just about 2 years ago now and pretty much doing anything and everything sales enablement within SoftServe. So we're a global, cutting edge company in the software development technology services space. Working with all those major CSPs, platform vendors, just trying to make sure that we're allowing businesses to gain a cutting edge and stay competitive in their market. So yeah, it's been an awesome time. Right now, to your point, I'm leading everything in North America and Latin America right now. So working with a bunch of different VPs and sellers and talking about some pretty cool technology and some cool accounts. So very, very appreciative for my opportunity to be at SoftServe and excited for the future for us.
Yeah, no, you guys are doing some pretty cool stuff. So, Alex, you know how we do this on the Revenue Hustle? We have revenue rules. So why don't you go ahead and give us your first revenue rule?
Yeah, so my first one, it's going to be, in sales, you need to embrace failure, right? And that's on a couple different dimensions. We can look at it from an enablement perspective and the amount of work that we have to do and different new avenues and enablements changing regularly. So, trying to stay up to date with new strategies and concepts so we can roll out to the sales teams. But at the same time, to be an effective seller, I often have to remind a lot of the sellers that I work with, and even myself when I was younger, that hey, you have to fail and you have to get comfortable with failing, especially in sales where it's a game of numbers. If you can't get comfortable in that area, it's going to be really hard to identify some of the gaps and challenges that you're struggling with today, and ultimately will limit your long-term growth and success in the future.
Yeah, no, that's failure is certainly part of it. And I think the obvious part is like you just get told no a lot. But, in our conversation, you just kind of mentioned there's a number of different dimensions of failure. And so let's start with the sales rep and this idea of failure as a point of emphasis or where you can learn, right? So expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think for myself, when I was a new hire at some of those previous selling roles that I had, and then, transitioning to the enablement role where I'm working with a lot of new sellers or tenured sellers that are moving into a new company that know how to sell but really don't know the products or the services or the company itself. I oftentimes would sit in these onboarding classes with, large groups of 30 plus or even groups of 5 and see the same consistent kind of apprehension to practice messaging, talk through, who the company is, what we do, what our value prop is. And ultimately, it's not because people don't want to engage. It's not because people don't want to learn. It's because failure is uncomfortable and you don't want to do that in front of people, let alone yourself, right? I can't tell you how many times as a sales rep before I moved into enablement that, on the drive home, in the shower, when I'm doing cardio at the gym, I would always in my head start going through messages, does this sound good? Nah, that wasn't so good. Let's try to change this. The second you put me in front of a group, the second you put me in front of a manager, the second I get in front of a customer, I would clam up. And I've seen that time and time again, even working with more tenured sellers that I do work with now who have 15, 20 plus years within a sales role. It's uncomfortable to do that. So what I try to get across to the individuals that I do work with, number one, from a personal experience, but number two, that, if you're here because of XYZ reasons for making money, whatever the case is, to really be able to identify why you're held back right now, why you're not hitting quota attainment, why you're not at that 150, 200% quota attainment. We can't identify that until we're able to see the actual gaps that you have day to day.
Right.
And doing that ultimately is uncomfortable. But man, if we're able to identify that today and have an immediate plan of attack to coach and fix this, a couple days from now, the light bulb might click and you might have a totally life-changing quarter that sends you in a totally different direction for quota attainment that you've had previously. So I think it's a really important concept to get comfortable with. And I try to press people as much as often to do things that are uncomfortable and fail. So that way we do have a plan of attack of how we can get better.
Well, I think yeah, I mean, you're spot on. I mean, there's a lot of things that are uncomfortable, right? And pitching anything new is uncomfortable, right? Because you just have to do it X number of times in order to kind of break through that. But there's that messy beginning where it's just like no matter how many times you say it, it just doesn't sound right. It's just not very good. I see it with my kids when they're trying to like learn something new and they're like, I don't want to do that because I'm like, well, it's like riding a bike. You didn't know how to ride a bike when you started. You fell
Yep.
over and all that kind of stuff, but you have to kind of be able to push through that. But that is, especially when you've been in sales for a long time or you see yourself as a professional, you're like, you don't like that because you're like, it kind of takes you back, right? And it's hard to get comfortable with that. So like, how do your sales reps that you work with respond to, you know, your encouragement to kind of go where they don't want to go?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, and this is the challenging part with enablement too. You're working with a lot of different personality types, right? So you have to be able to identify, first of all, how those individuals react to pressure, how they react to failure, and how you can kind of help navigate that in a sense. But, from general terms, I think the challenge that enablement professionals and even sales managers or reps might run into is that identifying skill gaps is a very uncomfortable conversation to have, especially in enablement where you're not that individual's manager, right? It's like, I'm showing you where you're lacking skills. I'm not really your boss, and I'm going to try to help you fix this. They can very easily, shoo you away and not want to spend the
Right.
time working with you. But it's important to understand, those gaps that they have. Why do they have those gaps? Is this something new? Is this something that's been, happening for a while? If that's the case, I usually will bring some kind of data-driven insight to them, right? So using something like Gong for conversational intelligence, I can very easily identify, hey, we're not talking about budget early or often enough in a sales call. I know that's uncomfortable for you. It's something we're able to identify. So let's talk about how we can change this, maybe make this happen a little bit earlier in the sales cycle, or even just you don't know the right question to ask about budget, right? So let's talk about that, brainstorm, and then we're going to apply it, whether that's in a workshop or, hey, if you're uncomfortable, we'll do it on a live call and see if it's actually going to be worthwhile and will help you move things forward. So that's usually what I'll do. I think previously when I started in enablement, having that kind of like iron fist methodology of like, this is wrong, let's fix it. It's not really a great opportunity to teach and
Right.
explain why that might not be the best way to go about it and why we can move forward in a better way. So I think being able to have more data-driven insights on that stuff, whether it's call shadowing, tools like Gong, et cetera, will allow you to open their ears up a little bit and let them say, you know what, I didn't really think about that. That's a good point. Maybe we'll talk about it a little bit. And that relationship starts to build and build. And all of a sudden, those people are coming back to you with self-aware gaps. And it's
Right.
like, oh, hey, I'm having a little bit of trouble here. Can you help me out? And now it's a totally different dynamic.
And do you see people that are willing to get uncomfortable, to kind of recognize that they're failing, right? Perform better than those that are resistant and just kind of keep trudging along?
100%. Yeah, that's I think the key to success from a selling perspective, and quite frankly, a lot of corporate jobs, if you're not constantly trying to get better, especially from a sales perspective, you're going to fall behind, right? Especially in technology, things are going to change very quick. So there's always going to be new concepts, new messages to learn. It's funny. I was just having this conversation earlier with one of the reps that I work with at SoftServe, and he was mentioning that when you look at the higher performing sellers within our organization, they're the ones that are constantly trying to go out and learn new concepts, new methodologies, and get feedback on what they can improve with. The individuals that aren't doing that are usually the ones that are kicking the can down the road from a forecasting perspective. And, it's like this deal's been closing for 6 quarters now and it's never going to close. I look at the same way, even like I was just at the driving range yesterday and, I've been playing golf since I was a kid, right? I'm not the best golfer. Quite frankly, I'm a terrible golfer, but I understand like I'm not good in certain areas or hitting with certain clubs. So instead of just being like, I'm just going to go keep playing and hopefully it's going to get better, I went to the driving range. I took the clubs out that I'm not good with and I got my swing down better. And it's a work in progress. But you have to keep going back to that challenge that you're running into to ultimately make it a strength. So if you're not comfortable with failure, my biggest
Yeah.
recommendation is get comfortable quick.
Yes, because then you're going to have a very uncomfortable conversation
At
if you're
some point,
not.
sure.
And so like you were saying to me, before in a prior conversation about just the same applies for sales enablement because you are asked to do so many new things and new oftentimes can produce learning the hard way, which is failure. So tell me a little bit about like how that manifests itself in sales enablement.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. So my previous role when I was at Dell, I was fundamentally more of a sales coach, right? So I was spending a lot of times on live calls, doing trainings, doing workshops, all that good stuff. We had a big marketing engine behind us for content. Our sales kickoffs, I guess you could say, wouldn't look like they do for where I'm currently at today at SoftServe, where these are major, major events from a company like Dell. At SoftServe, I walked in, I didn't have a lot of, previous content exposure. So I was just getting a lot of stuff from marketing and saying, okay, how can we make this more sales applicable? And then teaching from that perspective. And even like sales kickoff, I've never, led or, had a big ownership in a sales kickoff for an entire sales organization. So those are two things that, when I came into SoftServe, I'm like, I know how to do enablement. Just put me in, I'll figure it out. And those two areas, it was like, man, I'm not good at this stuff, or it's not that I'm not good, it's just I haven't had the exposure. So I had to learn really quick
Yeah.
what was going to be valuable for our organization, what the people needed. I mean, we're still working on that stuff today, but ultimately, you have to get outside of your comfort zone at some point to be able to fill the need that your role is supposed to provide to an organization. So for me, it's like coming in with no sales kickoff experience previously outside of the small little, meetings that we would have. I needed to learn really quick. What does it look like to talk to hotels and actually have, vendor contracts for that? What does event planning look like? How difficult is it pulling together multiple business units and getting them
Right.
on the same page for the same date, the same expectations, pre-work, post-work? It's a lot that goes into it. It's a full year job. And that was not something that I was like, I can do indefinitely right off the start. And it's something that I can do now, and I'm leading our sales kickoff efforts, and I love doing it. But if you ask me if I wanted to day one when I started, no, absolutely not, because
Right.
I'm not good at it. But now all of a sudden, if you look at my resume and you look at the capabilities that I have, it's allowed me to be a more well-rounded sales enablement
Sure.
professional. And quite frankly, allows me to have a little bit better, understanding of, all right, if I don't know how to do this stuff from an enablement lens, let me find out where there's something valuable that the sellers need or the organization needs, and I'll find the right people to go out to and actually learn how to do this. Similarly, how I found this podcast or other sales enablement podcasts, right? Learn from other individuals. It's okay to fail. It's not okay to continue failing.
Right. Right. And I think that I think is where growth is found, right? If there's no real risk of failure, then you're probably not pushing yourself, right?
Yes.
Or you're not growing, right? I think when we get comfortable, that's when complacency sets in and some people may not choose or want to grow, but I think that's where life is lived to the fullest when
Yes.
you are you know, not too close to the cliff, but close enough where you can feel the breeze. But no, I hear you. I mean, I think that's a great example, especially coming in and being asked to do things you've never done before, right? And I'm sure you had some healthy fear may not be the right word, but just like uncertainty or
Definitely fear.
some
Oh, for
doubt.
sure. Definitely
Yeah,
fear. There's no doubt. I mean, it's uncomfortable stuff. And, when an entire organization's turning you to be able to have some kind of valuable outcome, yeah, it's very scary. But at the end of the day, the way I like to look at it too, and this is part of getting comfortable with failure, is embracing that type of workload that you might not have been comfortable with previously. Because at the end of the day, when that project or that workshop or whatever it is done, and you did your best work and there was value, those are the best moments in my entire professional
yeah,
career.
Yeah.
No, it's like I'm worried the entire time. I'm stressed. I'm gritting my teeth while I'm sleeping. But then that last moment where everything comes together, it's beautiful. Why would you not want to be part of that, you know?
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I think that's where the reward comes, right? The growth, and you can step back and see that you made it, right? So no, that's great. I mean, I think we should all seek those opportunities as well, because every time you go through it, you go look back, you see what you learned. Now let's go do it again in some other new area.
Yep.
So, well, great. No, that's a great discussion. I think we can all take a lot away from that. Let's turn to your second revenue rule. Why don't you give it to us?
Yeah, this second one has been growing in my mind since I started in sales and had some challenges of my own when I first started. But the second rule for me is know your why. And there's two ways we can look at it from an enablement focus or just in general being a seller, being in a sales organization, and for anybody really, knowing your why is to, being able to progress and stay even keeled day to day and make sure that you are, ultimately staying true to why you're doing what you're doing. Right. So that's the first piece I would say. So, we could take a look from a sales enablement perspective and a general perspective as well. But if I had to tattoo one thing on my body from my entire professional career, that's what it would be.
And how did you get there?
So when I had started off in sales, obviously most people get into sales because they're money motivated, right? And a lot of people when they start off in sales don't realize how challenging of a role this is. If you're in a cold calling role, you're calling 100, 150 people a day, lucky to have five conversations, and maybe one or two of those turns into some kind of opportunity, right? It's very easy to forget the reason that you're working and the reason that you're doing your job if you're continually faced with, a negative answer from a prospect that you're reaching out to, or you're not attaining quota the way that you want to, or the person that you started with in a sales role is no better than you from a sales perspective in your eyes, but they're crushing quota and you're having a hard time staying off of a pip. So I was in that position. I had gone through a couple hard quarters in a SaaS company that I was working at, and I knew the product. I knew how to cold call, but something just was not clicking. And
Hmm.
going back to the previous point, I didn't get comfortable with failure. So I was kind of just on my own, in a little island, just failing and failing and failing and not getting better. And at one point, my manager came over to me and he grabbed me and pulled me into a room and he just said, "Why are you here?" And I was like, "Well, I need a job." Like, I mean, I thought that was obvious. I'm months into the role now. I thought that was an obvious answer, but he pushed me to really think about what I wanted in life. And at that time, obviously, things have changed. This is years ago. But I remember we had this quota board at the end of the aisle that we sat in, and all these desks, and everybody had just their name, and we'd write down all the different sales that we had throughout the week. And instead of having my name up there, I had actually printed out a picture of a home that I wanted to purchase in my hometown, and I put it up on that board. So every single time that I was having a bad day and I saw that thing sitting over the top of my monitor, I would check myself and say, "Hey, it's okay. It's just another no. You're that much closer to a yes." Or when I was walking up to that board to write down the sale that I closed, there was a little bit more fire from a positive
Yeah.
perspective. Like I'm getting that much closer to my why, right? And that changes for everybody based off of the stage that you're at in life. But at the end of the day, no matter what company, no matter what role, no matter what challenges you're running into, if you can't remember why you're truly there and what you're working towards outside of the company's perspective of their goals, then it's very easy to get lost and lose motivation day to day.
Hmm.
Obviously, that creates a spiral effect. And, we see people like quiet quitting and that type of stuff. For me, I know what I'm doing. I know exactly what I want in my life, and I know I have the drive and grit to get there. It's just a matter of reminding myself every day. And I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
posters and stuff all over my wall behind my monitor now reminding me of that too. So I live it day to day.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously in sales, there's a lot of up and downs, right? In that profession more so than many, right? We all have good and bad days, but we don't get measured and scored in most jobs like we do in sales, right? So it's really easy to go from hero to zero or just be a zero and never get the hero. So
Yep.
it's always in your face, right? And I think that's what you're saying is to being able to kind of quiet the noise or steady through the waves of up and down of selling is to just kind of understand um, set your sight on land, right? Because that's usually not going up and down like the waves are, but like it helped steady you. And I think it's great advice. I mean, have you shared that with others? That
Oh,
story and
100%. I mean, I got to be honest, and this is something that I still like makes me a little uncomfortable to this day because it was in a corporate setting. But I remember my previous role, we would have these new onboarding classes come in. It was a younger group of sellers. So it was either they've been in selling roles for a few years or they were fresh out of college starting a sales role. And every time I would give kind of like a general overview of what you're going to expect in this onboarding program, what you're going to expect from a career side of things as you progress throughout this company. My last slide was always know your why. And it still makes me uncomfortable, and it honestly chokes me up a little bit now. I remember that slide coming up the first time that I presented on it because I genuinely think this is one of the most important things that has helped me succeed in my career. And I got teary-eyed and couldn't necessarily speak the way I would normally want to because it was choking me up a little bit.
yeah.
But for me, I was adopted. I had a grandmother who really took care of me when I was a young
Mm.
individual, and both my parents were working like crazy. And at a base level, a root of things for myself day to day, like she and my parents are my why because they gave me the opportunity to have the life that I have, right? And they were able to mold me into this individual that does have grit and passion and enthusiasm. And that to me, every time I think back to that exact moment when I first, displayed that slide and started having this conversation with those individuals, it 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 burned itself into my brain because every single time I have a hard day now, that's the first thing I think of is like, if I get up and walk away from my computer before solving this problem, or I don't get on this call because I'm stressed and I don't need to add more stress to my day, I know that that's not how those individuals would expect me to be
Yeah.
in the way they raised me, and I want to make them proud, right? So after I delivered that the first time, it was a consistent theme of every time I talked to individuals, if they were newer and needed
Mhm.
direction in the role, or if they were having a very hard time and struggling and just needed a little bit more of like a, shake their shoulders a little bit and like wake up. You're good. You have the power to control your destiny here. You just need to kind of wake up and know why you're doing this. So
Yeah.
I come back to that all the time and probably come back to that at least once a day, if not more, on my own.
Wow, no, that's a great story. I mean, thank you for sharing that. Obviously, that comes from the heart and experience, and I'm sure that resonates with every person you tell, right?
So
And
yeah,
because sales is hard, especially for new people. Whether it's like you said before, whether you're new into the profession or you've been in the profession a long time, but now you're going into a new company, new products, new set of buyers. It's a bit of a road to journey before you can, be climbing the mountaintop. So no, that's really good. I mean, those are really great reminders, and keep pushing on and fighting through, and you're teaching us too, right? I mean, you've got that teaching element, right? Which is why you're in sales enablement, and
yeah.
you've got the background too of the sales coach. So no, that's great. Thank you for coming on here. Tell us how you kind of got into this role.
Yeah, it's it's funny when I moved into the sales role at Dell, I had already sold for a few years. I wasn't lacking confidence that I could be a successful seller, right? So in my head, as I was moving throughout that program, moving into an actual closing role rather than the BDR role that I started off as, I realized that a lot of the time I was spending, I was doing fine from a quota attainment perspective. I was having good conversations with customers. Nothing was bad on that end of things. But I realized when I really looked at my calendar after a few quarters, where I got the most enjoyment and pleasure out of my week was when I was working with the underperforming sellers or newer sellers that needed guidance, they needed support, they needed help. They needed to hear that, hey, there isn't one way to skin a cat necessarily, and you can say this a little bit differently and it may work for you. Or hey, if you're not more of an aggressive seller, you can take more of a laid back approach, and here's how you can change your talk track. And what I realized was that that filled up my cup far more on a day-to-day basis than quota attainment. And as much as I want to sit here and say, yeah, it would be amazing to, be an experienced seller down the road and, make 1, 2, 3 mil a year off of huge commission checks, that's great. But I don't think it necessarily aligns to what keeps me energetic and happy and driven day to day in a sales organization. So I get the same stuff being in enablement, right? I get to be part of customer conversations. I get to go out and, work with partners and some partner outings and stuff. I get to work with sellers and be able to identify gaps they might not see and be able to show them that light bulb moment. But at the end of the day, I wrap my day up and I know, hey, I was able to genuinely help somebody today. Whereas selling a product or a service to a customer, they may never even care about that 2, 3 years down the road. It was just something they needed at that exact moment.
Right.
For me, when I look back on, one sticky note that a sales manager put on my computer one day, it just said simple. I wanted to boil the ocean with the bits and bytes of technology and prove to people I knew what I was talking about. And
Mhm.
that one piece of feedback changed my entire trajectory as a seller. And that light bulb moment that I lived is something that I've been able to give back to numerous sales reps, whether they're early in tenure or, very tenured sellers. And those are the moments that I live for and that continue to, I think back and smile about. And man, it's the best feeling in the world.
So did someone tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, we think you'd be good in sales enablement, or did you just kind of like
Not
start?
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily like an ask of anybody. I had a good relationship with the individual who led the enablement program at Dell. He actually, as I was struggling a little bit as a seller, he became one of my mentors to work through some of the technology, messaging, and all that stuff. So it was something that I always thought about. And then the role opened up, and I basically was like, "Hey, I'm really interested in this. Do you think I'd be a good fit?" And then from there, we looked back at the history that I had in those sales roles. Fortunately enough, there wasn't a crazy pool of candidates at the time. So it was like, hey, I'm able to really show my strengths here. And yeah, it brought me into that role. So I was very early on as a junior, basically just like program management, onboarding type stuff. And man, after that first year and a half, I was absolutely in love with the role and just made sure that, all right, this is going to be my career from here on out. So I hope I can find somebody that I can do something similar with where it's like, hey, you're going to be a really great fit here. Luckily, I was able to do that in my last role and pull a few people in that are probably going to be career enablement folks now. But yeah, no matter how I landed up here, very happy that I'm here. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, no kidding. That's apparent. So you certainly landed in the right spot. So where can we follow you online, Alex?
Yeah, so LinkedIn for sure. I definitely need to start posting a little bit more. Day to day as we get busy within the work hours, that definitely falls behind. So I'm trying to do a little bit more networking with people, staying, close to, industry experts or peers of myself within the enablement space. So definitely through LinkedIn. Um, I am part of a few different like sales enablement groups throughout LinkedIn and those, smaller discussion forums and stuff. So there's always great conversations and dialogue going on there. And the other thing too, I say this to everybody, whether it's interviews, for a sales perspective, enablement, people that are, thinking about getting into enablement. I'm always an email or phone call away. I'm very passionate about this career and I want to allow the right people to find the job because I think it's still not a really well-known role across, all of sales organizations. So anytime anybody wants to reach out, I can give you my cell, but my email, I'll attach as well. But it's apaca@softserveinc.com. So if anybody wants to reach out and chat, I'm more than happy to take some time.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the Revenue Hustle. Great discussion, and let's do it again soon.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to The Revenue Hustle. This episode has been brought to you by 9lenses. Close more deals with interactive assessments. Check them out at 9lenses.com. See you next time.